good evening or good morning, depending on where you are joining from. I also want to thank the organizers for arranging such a big conference with the 2 days, multiple tracks, and also giving me the opportunity. And I also want to thank the attendees because nowadays there is so many virtual conferences. People are stressed with the pandemic, so it's not easy to after a full day of work coming and listening to me for an hour. Hopefully your time is useful, and as the host mentioned, please post your question in the chat, and I also will share my screen, my contacts, my all the materials, so in case if we do not get to answer a question, or if you have other questions after the talk, you can always get in touch with me. That's always welcome. So no worries there. Okay, so I'm not going to read my bio. Dinesh mentioned few things. I'm also in the interest of time, I'll move on. So I only want you to take note of my contacts on the left side of this slide, as you can see, and I monitor all those. So Twitter, email, my blog post, and anything. So all these will work. If you need to get in touch with me, use any of this method. So before I start this talk, I want to talk about a little bit why should you listen to this talk, right? Because you have other options. So this is a true scenario from 2019. In the UK South region, there was an outage, and some of the services were actually down for 16 hours, 11 minutes. So if you're running your business, or if you're a database professional, data platform engineer, and you have Azure SQL Database that's supporting your company's business, the question you want to ask yourself, can I afford this kind of downtime, right? If my databases are down, if my customers cannot connect to the app for 16 hours, can I afford that, right? Or can our business afford that? If the answer is no, then you're definitely listening to the right talk. So we'll talk about some of the options that today you can deploy if you're using Azure SQL Database. And I'm exclusively talking about Azure SQL Database. I'm not going to touch on hyperscale. I'm not going to talk about SQL Server on Azure VM. I know those are options, but in the interest of time, I'll totally focus on a PaaS service on Azure SQL Database. And if you need help with those other flavors of SQL Server, please get in touch with me, and I should be able to help you out. So there are two terms, Rto and Rpo. Most people are familiar with. If you are not, before you deploy your solution, I definitely want you to understand what this two term means. One is a recovery time objective and recovery point objective. These two basically, in a layman's term, it's saying, in case of a disaster, how much data I can afford to lose, and how quickly I can be back into business, right? So how much time I need to recover from a disaster. And these are the two terms. It's not enough just for you to understand, right? So definitely, if you're a tech lead, if you're a designer, if you're an architect, please talk to your business counterpart, right? Make sure you are in agreement with them. Talk to them and ask them, what do they need? And it's not just also enough just talking to them, right? You also want to document this to make sure that you are on the same page, right? You are not in a disagreement when there is a real disaster. So you definitely want to make sure you're in agreement. So these two terms have been there for ages, even before I started working in this industry. Rto, Rpo was always there. But there is a new term now called ERT. And this is something I want to draw your attention, which is a estimated recovery time. And this is nothing else other than it's the max ERT equals the RTO. So why we're talking about a different ERT, right? Before we only knew about RTO, recovery time objective, and that was good enough. So why now I need to bring this third new term called ERT? The reason we need to get to the ERT, or we need to know once you look at all the solutions that I'm going to show you, the different, each one has a different recovery time. So depending on what option you choose, right? I'll show you 4 different ones. And, if you want to reduce this ERT, say, you definitely need to put some more effort and it will come with some cost, right? So that's why it's important to talk to your business. They say, okay, for example, if I'm just relying on my backup, my RTO for a total, if a zone goes down, if I have to bring up my Azure SQL database in a different zone, my RTO is 12 hours. That's what Microsoft guarantees you, that you should be able to restore in a different zone from your backup, but it might take 12 hours. So you go and ask your business owner, okay, are you okay with, being down for 12 hours? He said, no. Okay, you cannot. Okay, so I show you other options, but that's going to cost you more money. So that's why you want to know what's the maximum estimated recovery time. So in this case, you might not need 12 hours, right? You might be able to restore it within the next 4 hours. But that's not what Microsoft guaranteed. Microsoft guaranteed it's 12 hours. So you should make it clear, and you should be in agreement. So this is just a visual, if some of you are new to this industry, some of you are getting into Azure, or in general, you're looking at high availability and disaster recovery. I just put this slide just easy to grasp what I'm talking about, right? What is RPO, RTO? Now there can be a difference of opinion about that orange line, right? And the reason I put this there right now, you might argue with me that should this be here, right? And I can argue in both ways, right? It should be here or it shouldn't be here. Why? Because sometime, right, we always assume it's just in our head that if a disaster happen, we have all these alerts and we have this monitoring solutions, we'll know right away. But that might not be the case. To give you an example, say you had a deployment at night, or it's kind of evening in India. So say you had a deployment in the morning and someone updated some data or someone deleted some data, and the application was not reading that particular table, right, or the data set, and you didn't know. Suddenly after 4 hours, somebody is querying that, they're getting error message or they're getting different data and they get notified. Now you trace it back and you find that, oh, this happened during the deployment. Now that's the orange line, right? The disaster happened 4 hours ago, but you are only notified after 4 hours. So and then you start working to recover, right? So that's why I put that note that sometimes it's not obvious. So this is one part I highly urge you that you talk to your business partner. So before we really dive into this slide, I'm not going to go into details, but I want you to be aware that Azure SQL Database comes in very many different flavor, right? So you have your purchase model is a DTU and vCore. I'm not going to details, but DTU stands for Database Transaction Unit. I'll show you a picture and I'll talk about it briefly. Just if some of you are new, you know what I'm talking about. Then you come to your service tier, means your basic, standard, premium, general purpose, hyperscale. Then it comes to compute tier. You can be serverless, you can be provision. Now within the provision, you have many different options, right? You have different hardware. So why you need to be aware before you deploy your Azure SQL Database, because the solutions that I'm going to talk about or I'm going to show you, not everything is available in every tier. Not everything is available for every hardware type. So you want to be careful. Give you an example. M series, as you can see, I actually do not have M series. That's okay. I need to fix this slide. So that's the new one that got added. That's a memory optimized, compute that you can get, but that one doesn't support zone redundancy. If you need 35 days of point-in-time recovery and you deploy your Azure SQL Database in basic tier, you do not get that option. So basic tier only supports up to 7 days of point-in-time recovery. So you want to be aware that what's your, again, go back to your RPO, RTO, what kind of solution you're going to deploy. Then you look at, okay, what are the SQs that offer that solution that I'm looking for, and you only deploy those. Do not deploy one that again doesn't support that whatever HADR solution that you agreed with your business counterpart. So I talked about DTU versus vCore. I'll just briefly touch on this. I will also put an URL at the bottom of this slide. If you want to read more, please go there and read more. But DTU model is, as I said, it's abstract of your compute, storage, I/O, and everything, right? So you really you cannot choose separately your compute, your I/O, and storage. These are all bundled together. Whereas in vCore model, you can select your compute, your storage separately. Microsoft do recommend that you go with the vCore model. DT was the first when Azure SQL Database launched, was deployed, and vCore came later on. So currently, Microsoft's recommendation is to go with vCore model. Does that mean that you cannot stay with DTO model? Absolutely, you can. If you choose that, there is no restriction. But again, you want to look at what is available and what is not. So that's kind of the background. Now we're going to dive into the main talk of high availability during disaster, right? So these are four of the solutions that I can think of as of today. Now, some of you, if you are working with this for a while, you're probably wondering why I put the temporal table, right, in this slide. This is really not a HADR solution, but if you know what's the temporal table, it enables you to restore raw versions from any point in time. But again, it has some limitations with different tier. So if you are deploying this sometime, I'm not saying this is a total high availability or disaster recovery solution, but if you have an issue with your data, you might be able to recover some of it, right? What was the state of your row in a previous point in time? Gives you, and I'm not going to even talk about it. This is the same solution that you have on premises. There is no difference. But this can save you some time. So that's the only reason I put it here. Next, we're going to talk about all other 5 solutions, and I'm going to demo some of this. So let's move on. So before we go there, this is a slide that you want to use. What I've been talking about is talking to a business partner, right? Why, right? So this clearly shows that if you just rely on the backup, your Rto, Rpo is 12 hour and 1 hour. The question you want to ask them again, are you happy with it? No. Okay, then I have other options. You have auto failover groups, and you have active geo-replication, and those gives you better RPO and RTO. But again, those will come with a cost, right? If you're going with active geo-replication, you have to have another secondary stand-up. Same with auto failover groups. So you are paying for now double compute and storage. But if you need that RPO, RTO, yes, you have to spend that money, right? There's no choice. So let's talk about automated backup. So with Azure SQL Database, that's something you really do not have to worry about. You once set this up and you forget about it, right? It's not like on premises that you set up your full differential and transactional backup. You monitor those, you make sure those are being taken care. You have enough space in your drive or whatever you are doing. You do not have to do all this. You just tell what kind of retention you want, and Microsoft will take care of the whole thing. Again, before I show you some of the options, one thing I want you to be aware that I put a bullet point here that you lose control of precise RPO. Why did I say that, right? Think about your on-premises SQL Server. You can exactly schedule everything. Say if you want to take your transaction log backup every 5 minutes, 15 seconds, you have that option, right? But going to Azure PaaS solution, you really lose control of that. And what I mean by that, you cannot schedule this, right? You do not have that option. You just say what you want, and Microsoft will do it. But there is some flexibility in there, as you can see in my, I said. Let me move to the next slide. Then I think it's going to make more sense. So for differential, for full backup, as soon as you deploy Azure SQL Database, within 30 minutes, it starts taking a full backup. And depending on your size, it will finish sometime. Then you go to differential backup and transactional log backup, right? For differential, it's between 12 and 24 hours. For your transaction log, it's between 5 and 10 minutes. And this is one of the main reasons that I said that you lose the precise control of this, right? Because it's between 12 and 24, and transaction log is 5 and 10 minutes. So you want to be aware of that. You have point in time backup retention, as I mentioned before. It's by default you get 7 days, and you can slide it up to 35 days. If you are in a basic service tier, you do not get that. The max you get is 7 days, so be aware of that. And then you also have long-term retention, right? So like I work for a financial industry, for investment management firm. For me, 35 days is not good enough. So I need to keep some of the backups for a longer period. So you have that option here. You can keep it for up to 10 years. And they're all backups by default are geo-redundant, means your backup automatically get copied to a different region. Now, for regulatory reason, for compliance reason, if your company, you do not want your backups to get replicated to a different region, you can stop that. You can say, I do not want this, I only want locally redundant backup. But then it also has a downside. If this zone goes down and you didn't have active geo-replication or failover group set up, and you are only relying on the zone, only relying on the backup for your HADR solution, and you turned off your geo-replication or your geo-redundant backup, now if your primary zone goes down, you wouldn't be able to restore your database in a second region. So just keep that in mind before you make that choice, right? That's why Microsoft by default, all backups are geo-redundant. If you have any question, please put it in the chat, and then the moderator can stop me. I do not mind getting stopped in the middle. I rather ask your question instead of just going through my slides and my talk. And we'll probably be in the slide for another 15 minutes, and then we'll switch to demo. But if I'm going too fast, not clear, please do stop me. So for the long-term retention backup, you have a couple of choices. You have your weekly backup, you have your monthly backup, and you have your yearly backup. So yearly backup is really not defined, right? So what's a yearly backup? So you really define your yearly backup by saying what number of weekly backup. So I can say keep my 5th week's backup from every year for up to 10 years, right? You can do something like that, and you can say weekly, and we'll see this in the demo. What can you do with those backups that we've been talking about? So you can have a point-in-time restore to your existing Azure SQL Server or existing database. When you say existing database, you really cannot write it over. So you have to restore with a different name, and then you can delete your original one, or rename that one and rename the one that you just restored. If you delete a database by mistake, you can always do a point-in-time restore. One caution here: if you delete your server, you also lose your point-in-time backups. You still have your long-term retention backups, but you lose the point-in-time ones. You can do a geo restore, which I just talked about, restore a database in another geographic region, and you can use your long-term backup for restore to a different database if you need to, for up to 10 years, if you choose to retain for up to 10 years. There's some caution: you cannot override existing database, and if you delete your server, you lose your point-in-time backups. Just keep that in mind. Microsoft does some of this stuff, behind the scene for the backup integrity. So they do test restore. I did not find a documentation how frequently they do it, how they pick the backups. I haven't seen this, but it's clearly mentioned. Also, they do DBCC check DB. And does that mean I'm saying that you don't run this? I'm not advocating this. I'm just saying Microsoft does it for you. All the backups are also done with a checksum. So I just want to make sure, I spell this out. I get this question often: can I restore a Azure SQL database on premises SQL Server? Natively, the answer is no. You cannot just take the backup and restore. But there are different ways. There are different tools you can do that. I'm not going to go into details because that's out of the scope of this talk. I just listed some of the tools that you can explore. And if you need more details, please let me know. Now, as soon as you deploy a Azure SQL database, it does come with a built-in HADR without you doing anything. So what do I mean by that? If you're in a basic, standard, and general purpose tier, again, that's why it's important to know your tiers, right? That I've been talking about, because a lot of things from here that I'll show you, things will differ tier to tier. That's why, you want to make sure that you know what tier you are deploying. So if you look at this picture, you have your primary replica. It's a VM. It has attached storage, which is a SSD, and it has your TempDB. And on the right, with the failover arrow, you see there it shows a couple of other compute nodes, right? And each one has the TempDB in the SSD. So, and of course, the storage is attached, but there is no TempDB right now because you are running on your primary replica. Your data and log files will be shared in a locally redundant storage. And your backups are still in a standard storage and they're geo-replicated by default. And if your application is connecting to a Azure SQL database, there's two different ways to connect. One is you can always go to the gateway and then get where is your SQL Server located, and you can come and connect. Or you can get that once and you can save it and you can directly connect to your SQL Server every time. You do not have to go through the gateway. There are two different ways you can set this up. And there are some pros and cons. Now, if there is an issue that Microsoft detect with your primary replica, what is going to happen? It is going to spin up a brand new SQL Server instance on a node that has compute availability. And of course, as soon as it moves there, it restarts the SQL Server, your TempDB get created, and the storage of the data and log file will get attached to it. So it's pretty much, if you are familiar with failover cluster instance, it's the shared storage, different compute. It's pretty much same concept. Now, this one in a basic standard general purpose tier takes a little bit longer compared to premium and business critical, and I'll show you a live demo of this. You can test this by yourself. Microsoft let you fail over I think once in every 15 minutes just for testing purpose. And you do not have to do any connection, you do not have to know that what host it failed over, because next time after you connect, the gateway will take care of it. So your connection string remains as is, you automatically fail over. Now, if you go to premium and business critical tier, you see the picture changed. Now, with each of my compute, my data and log file is attached. It's not shared with all the 4 nodes, right? Now, one thing here is one of the secondaries in the premium and business critical tier, one of the secondaries always in sync, right? So as soon as you make a command to your primary replica, it had to make sure that that transaction got committed at least in one replica before you get the commit. So one of your replica out of 4 is always in sync with the primary. So in case if the service fabric detect a problem, it will fail over to that node that's already in sync. And as you can see in this case, it doesn't have to connect to the common storage. It's already attached. And your storage stays same, and then you'll be back into the business. This is pretty quick. It's less than 10 seconds in my test. And again, you do not have to do anything on your application side, right? Microsoft takes care of this automatically. So far what I talked about, these are all within a data center. Now, Microsoft, some of the zones are pretty big, right? Like East US 2, I know is pretty big. East US 2 has multiple data center. So if you are not setting up some of the other options that's that zone redundant, what can you do if a whole data center goes down, right? That's a possibility. How can you make your Azure SQL database redundant for a single data center going down? So there is another concept called zone redundancy. And before I go further, I want to spell this out that by default, this is turned off. And you will realize as we go why this is turned off. So each region, this is within a zone, have its independent power, cooling, and network, right? So this gives you, if like as I said, let me go to this picture. Again, I'll differentiate between general purpose and business critical. And people will call this different thing. If you see, they will say zone redundant. They will say AZ1, 2, 3. So a zone has been divided into three different. Sorry, a region has been divided into three different zones. And within those three different zones, now you have different sets of compute and attached SSD for 10 dB for general purpose. But again, they all point to the same data and log file that I showed you before. For general purpose, this is still in public preview. It's disabled by default. If you want to turn this on, this is going to cost you extra money for general purpose. Whereas in premium and business critical, you do not have to pay extra money. One thing you note here that I have a bullet point here, it's only available with Gen 5 compute. So again, what I was telling you before, you should know what solution you want to deploy before you choose your SQ for your Azure SQL database. So if you do not have Gen 5 hardware, you cannot turn this on even if you want to. Now, why this is disabled by default? As soon as you turn this on, let me go to the next one, right? In the premium and business critical tier, if you turn this on, it will be a synchronous replication to keep all your nodes in sync. Because now what you are saying that if there is a problem within a region, in different zones, you fail me over. And in order to do that, they have to make sure that all the nodes within a region are in sync. So you will see probably a higher latency from your app side. So you just want to be aware before you turn this on. You probably want to test it and see if your application can tolerate that kind of latency before you turn it on. The concept you saw before, what I was showing you, is the same. You are not sharing your storage, right? You are not sharing your data and log file. Each compute has its own data and log file, and they're always kept in sync. And your backup is still in a standard storage with geo redundancy. So why should you turn this on, right? What are you getting out of it? So look at the service level agreement. So if you have single zone, it's 99.99, and for multiple zone, it's 99.995. So you get a better SLA with that. I could not find a official SLA if you turn it on for basic standard general purpose, I believe, because it's still in preview. So as soon as it goes GA, I'm sure Microsoft will publish that. And I put a URL and I put a kind of a sign to read this, because this document, if you click this URL, will take you to a page that actually gives you more details about the SLA for all different kind of solutions that you deploy. So you want to read those, get those numbers, and again agree with your business owners. So we'll talk about active geo-replication. This is now we are talking about region redundancy. So if the whole East US2 goes down, my business, I'll be failing over to a different region, so probably Central US. this is available in all tier other than hyperscale. And the way they do this, so if you look at this picture, if you notice that I have my primary and I have my secondary, they're constantly getting replicated, and this is a asynchronous replication. So just so you know, and you can send your traffic to the secondaries. In your connection string, you have to say that you only want to read, and it will automatically send those traffic to your secondary. And you can have up to 4 secondaries. You can have secondary in the same region for your read traffic, right? So these two are closer, so your your latency will be less. So you can have like 2 nodes in the same region, one for read write, one for read, and you can have 2 other in 2 different regions for HA and DR solution. You can do multiple things. You can design this. This one you have to do manual failover, and you have to make sure that you change your connection string when you failover manually. There is no automatic failover with this, and this is per database. So you cannot have a set of database failover as a group as we can do today on premises with always on availability group. There is a different solution which we're going to go next. Now, if you have a particular call that you are making to your database or a transaction that you cannot afford to lose, right? You absolutely want to make sure that this transaction get replicated to the secondaries before I get acknowledgement back. You can do that. I'm not going to go into details, but look at that store procedure. You can take advantage of this within your code. This will guarantee that your transaction will be replicated to secondaries before you get your acknowledgement back. So this was active geo-replication was released first, then came auto failover group. Now, why Microsoft needed the auto failover group, right? If you are using always on availability group on premises, you might have multiple databases that's supporting one particular application. And if you want to fail over, you want to be transactionally consistent when you fail over for your application purpose, right? And also, there are a couple of other things that Microsoft needed. One I talked about, like with active geo-replication, you have to change your connection string every time you fail over, and you probably do not want to do that. With auto failover groups, you do not have to do that. So let me go to the slide. With auto failover group, now you will see a couple of differences between the picture that I showed you before. If you see on the left side, before we had one database, now we are seeing multiple databases. But on the right side now, I do not have multiple secondaries. So again, you want to be aware of these things. So with failover groups, you can only have one secondary in a different region. You cannot have it in the same region. And you can have multiple database groups. So when you fail over, all the databases are going to fail over to the secondary. In the previous picture, we did not see something called listener. Now here we have listeners. What does that mean? If I use these listener endpoints in my connection string, once I fail over, I do not have to do anything. I do not have to make any change. It will be taken care of automatically. My traffics will be routed. The read write will route to the where the read write is, and my read only will route automatically. So that's the benefit, right? But again, I lose that couple of things. I'll show you a comparison slide later on that you can use going forward. So these are the two endpoints I'm talking about, and I'll show you this connecting to this, and I'll show you the server names when you go to the demo. So if you take this, as soon as you create failover groups, you can retrieve this, put this in your connection string, you're all set. You don't have to change this. Now, how does the auto failover works, right? So there's a setting called grace period with data loss hours. The minimum setting for this is an hour. You really want to understand a little bit more deep what this setting does. So the documentation is there, but I would say it's not 100% clear. I recently spent a bunch of time talking to some of the program managers at Azure SQL team, especially Dimitri. I want to thank him because he gave me a bunch of feedback. So I didn't want to just keep that to myself. So I wrote a blog post. If you click this URL, it will take you there. I actually wrote a detailed blog post about what does this mean. How this 1 hour, the minimum setting is 1 hour to 24 hours. You can set this up. How does that affect your failover? So you really want to understand that, before you put this. And you can decide not to have auto failover. You can say, no, I'm going to failover by myself. I'll decide when to failover. This is a chart that you really want to familiar yourself before you decide if you want to go with auto failover groups or you want to just stay with the Jira application. As you can see here, your failover option, how many databases you can failover, your connection string. One of these is not supported with the managed instance. If I need a secondary in my primary region for my read traffic, you do not get that with auto failover group. So yeah, again, familiar yourself. This is a piece of code that I put here. If you want to monitor the lag between your primary and secondary, this one also has some confusion with the documentation, and I'm currently actually in touch with the Azure SQL team to clarify this, to update some of the documentation, and I'll probably put in a blog post. It's not updated yet, especially one of the column, the last replication, the third column you see here in my select statement, absolutely wrong documentation. So just keep that in mind, because if you look at the data set and if you read the documentation, you will get confused. Actually, not might. So these are some of the stuff that I'm going to show you in the demo. These are some of the resources that we talked about. And if you want to read more details, please go ahead. If I'll share the code and the slide with the organizers. But if some of you want it earlier, you can scan this. It will take you to my GitHub repo. I'm going to refresh the GitHub repo today because I made some adjustment. This morning, I also noticed there was a issue with one of my slides. I'm going to fix that. So just give it a few hours. Maybe tomorrow morning India time will be a perfect one to download those. This is again my contact. So I'm going to switch my screen for a minute. So just bear with me for the demo. This will be a good place if you really want to put some questions, comments, if anyone has any. I'm not sure if I can put anything in the chat. I probably cannot. Okay. So I'm switching to the demo. Okay. So I'm using a Azure Data Studio. This is a new multi-platform tool, and I'm using a notebook. If you do not know what's a notebook, I will highly urge you to look it up. I love this. I could have done this in any PowerShell other tools that come with Windows by default, and there are other ones you can use. But I choose this one because I can have my comments, my references, my URLs, everything in one place, and I can also run my code, and I can save the result set, and I can save it and send it to someone, so they can also look at the result of my code. Because I'm switching to demo, so you'll probably be noticing that I'm looking at the other screen. So before all of you or I went live, I actually ran all of this code in the interest of time, and my demo will start here. But I don't want you to feel like that I'm skipping some stuff that you have no idea what I did. So I'm just going to show you what those code did. Those code basically created this resources. So 3 Azure SQL Server, and the Azure SQL Server is a logical container for Azure SQL Database. It's not something that we are used to on premises. It only has a master just to keep track of few things. And it created 2 of the database. So at this point, as you see, I haven't set up any active geo-replication. I haven't set up failover groups or anything, right? Because I want to also show you the built-in HADR solution that I talked about. So that's all I created so far from that notebook. and we're going to start here. So let's go back to portal one more time. If I go to this server, and if I go to the backup, and I apologize because I'm doing this live demos, there will be some pauses, which is the last thing that you want to do during a remote session. If we are in person, we could talk about something else. But I thought of this, but I think showing you in some demos probably will make more sense. So there will be some silent period. Will be good places to ask questions or if you have any. So this is my database. If I look at this, by default, I only got point in time 7 days, and there is no long-term retention, right? So anything I show you in portal, I also I have a PowerShell script to do that, right? So we are looking at long-term retention. As you can see, these are all zeros here. It means I do not have any long-term retention. Now I'm going to set up some long-term retention. What I'm saying here, keep my weekly backups for 12 weeks, keep my 16th weekly backup for 5 years, and I do not need any monthly retention. And this is just for demo purpose. I don't have a reason, why did I set this up? This was just to show you. So I'm setting this up with this PowerShell code. And if we go to the portal, now switch, we should see a different retention than you can already see here. It's 12 weeks and this, right? When we saw last time, we saw these were empty, right? And I also talked about that I can slide this to 35 days, right? So if you choose this and you say configure policies, I can come here and I can slide this up and down whatever I want, right? By default, it comes with 7 days. Again, keep in mind, if you're in a basic tier, you cannot change this, right? So let's cancel this and go back to this. Now, if you want to look it up without going to the portal, now as you can see, my long-term retentions are set up, right? If you want to remove this, I'm not going to run this. I'm just trying to save my time. If you want to remove that long-term retention, you can definitely do that by running this piece of code. Now let's see some action on the built-in HADR, right? As I said, this database that I created, let me go back and show you. If we go to the computer and storage, this is a general purpose, as you can see here, right? It's a general purpose. And I haven't set up anything else. What I'm going to do, there's a tool called Ostress. If you are not familiar with, I put a URL here. Go and read about that. Data professionals use this always to, test hardware, generate workload for many reasons. If you are doing a new release, if you want to, compare pre and post, you can run this. So what I'm doing here, I'm connecting to that database that I showed you, and I'm just doing a select statement, right? Just mimicking what your, say our app server is making a select call. As you can see, this select is going on, right? We are collecting, it's doing a count, nothing fancy. Now, I'm going to initiate a failover. And it actually happened a lot quicker, but I get the acknowledgement a little bit back. I'm also getting the time, how many seconds it takes. If you do not collect all this info, you will see that it will be a lot quicker. So a question is, what is the default failover mechanism provided by Azure when I create deploy only Azure SQL? This is what exactly it does, but you do not initiate failover. I'm just showing you this. Microsoft will take care of automatic, because the service fabric always keeping an eye on your resources. As soon as it detects that your primary or the node that you are in have an issue, Microsoft will initiate what I'm doing right now, and they will move you to a different server. But I'm showing you that what kind of experience you will have or from your application side. So I'll show that. So Dinesh post another question. Is there any calculator to compare and know pricing with different values for PDR weekly retention? So, okay, it's a good question. So I showed you that the point in time retention can be from 7 to 35 days. And the question is, how do I know that how much money I'm paying? Absolutely. So if you go to the pricing and look up I can send you a URL, whoever asked the question, there is, it's all documented. So you can monitor how much space you are taking for your backup, and based on that you will get charged, right? So by default, whatever is your data size, you get the same size of storage for free. And because the backups are highly compressed, right? So you can have multiple copies, with the full diff and transaction log. As soon as you go above that limit, you start paying for the storage, and it's the same that you pay for any other storage. Yes, there is, and there are some counters that you can monitor. You can also write some of this into the log analytics workspace, and you can get notified. And you can write some query to calculate how much you'll be paying. Yes, that's available. And if this does not answer your question, if you send me a ping, I'll definitely can. I'm not sure off my head if that URL is in my resource, but there is one for sure. I was even looking at it yesterday when I was reviewing this this talk. So now this is doing this select, right? So the question is the failover mechanism. What your app is going to experience if there is a failover, or if so as you can see now, we are getting a timeout, right? So your app, now people are complaining to you, right? Hey, we cannot connect. And you shouldn't be, if you do not have active geo application or failover group, you really cannot do anything, right? Because you didn't set up anything, and that's what you agreed with the business, right? And we should see that within a couple of seconds, our app will automatically reconnect and will start doing those selected statements. And I'm also trying to capture here, how many seconds. So in my test, I am over 600 mile, from most of the data center, probably in East US too, right? In Virginia. So it took about 47 seconds because, I'm so far, and I'm home connecting with my laptop, right? If you are in a, bigger setup with bigger pipes, I'm sure, you will see, most likely it's less than 30 seconds, right? Hopefully that answered the, question that someone asked about, default failover mechanism, right? Now, I'm going to do the same for business critical. And this time we are pointing. So let me go back and show you. So I just pointed to this one, right? Now I'm going to point to this. And as you can see here, I deployed this in a business critical. So same thing. I'm starting a workload. Same as before. It's just going to do selects. You will see that I'm doing that. And this time you will see, because it's a business critical tier, it's going to be a lot faster. Especially if I'm doing this, from my workplace in my data center, with a bigger machine, and we have express route, it's less than 10 seconds. Because I'm doing it from home, as I said, still, it's 17 seconds. So within 17 seconds, even if I have an app that's sitting, app server sitting in my home, I'll be up and running. So hopefully it makes some sense. So this is all built in, right? I haven't done anything. So now let's move to active geo application. So what you're going to do, let me show you in Portal. I have these two servers. primary and secondary. In the primary, I have one database. If I go to my secondary, there's no database. I'm going to set up a geo-replication for that database from primary to the secondary. And if I don't get to the end, don't worry, all these are available in GitHub. I'm going to refresh the repo. They're all variable driven. You have to just make very minimum changes, connect to your account, and you can run all this. I'll definitely leave last few minutes for question and answer. So let's go to portal and see what's going on here. If you go to the Geo Replication tab, you can see that at the central US, at the secondary, the database already got created and now it's in the seeding, right? So it's doing the initial sync. Once it's done, then anything flows. It's same as as we set up always on availability group on premises. Okay, still working on it. As soon as it's done, then we should be able to move. And as I said, you do not have any automatic failover, right? So it's done. As you can see, it got caught up, percent complete, 100%. Let's close this. We don't need that window. Now, for a failover, this is the command. So I'm initiating a failover now. If we go to the portal, this should change, right? Now, the East US2 is our read-write, and Central US is our readable, right? So as soon as the failover is done, we should be able to see that the roles will change. It's not yet. As you can see now, okay, it's done, right? So now you see the Central US is our online, and the East US2 took the role of the readable. You didn't get the acknowledgement back yet, but as you can see in the portal that it's done. And then we'll fail back for the next demo. As you can see here, things are done at a database level, right? But as soon as we move to Failover Group, it will be done at a server level. So this is done. So let's put the, I'm just failing back to where I was. So the Failover Groups are at a database level, at a server level. Why? Because I can have multiple databases in a Failover Group, right? And I can fail them over at the same time. So for that to work, we're going to create a Failover Group in a server. And you can create a Failover Group first, empty, and then you can keep adding your database. You can add database and take it out of the Failover Group as needed. A question from business point of view: how do you convince your stakeholder for the budget incurred for the additional infra setup if the query over cost factors, right? A question from business owner: how do you convince, right? So that's a good question that you asked. How do I convince my business owners? Ideally, I'll be honest with you. I'll be very blunt with you. This is not a role that we need to play. Right? I do not need to convince anyone. I think our job as a data professional is to put the facts out, right? Tell them exactly, give them the URLs, read the documentation, show them, hey, this is what it is. So, right? And I'm sure if you have an incident manager, or people call it different role, right? You want to take advantage of, you want to ride on that role, right? Where I work, we have an incident manager. That person keep track of all the HADR setups. If someone say, hey, I don't need this, what I do, I actually add her. I said, hey, can you document this, that this app doesn't need this, right? please document this in your disaster manual. So when we have a disaster recovery, if they ask, hey, why can't you fail over? Oh no, you told us that you do not need that, right? And it's documented. So you come later. You are a tier 3 app, right? So you want to be a little bit, I don't know if I should say, I don't know, like diplomatic, probably the right word, not being political. So, this is not an exact science. I know we always think about 0 and 1 because we work with data. You probably need a little bit more, a little bit of soft skill, right? So, and if they're not convinced, right, just get it in writing, right? So they don't point finger to you when they really need that badly, right? So I know probably didn't answer your question directly, but that's how I manage this. I'll be honest with you. So, okay, so I'm just going to create a failover group, and keep posting your questions. I'll stop if there's question, but if there is no question, I'll continue and use my time to show you the failover group. But questions will take precedence because we are in the last 5 minutes, and I definitely want to respect that. So please, let me know if you have a question. So now I'm going at a server level. And if I go to failover group, I created this failover group, as you can see, and there is no database right now, right? It's just a shell. And now I'm adding a database into the failover group. And we should see that now it says 0 of 1. It will change from 1 to 1, and we should be able to see what database is there, right? As you can, just a visual that I'm using a East US 2, and my secondary is in Central US. And now look at these endpoints, right, that I was talking to you. You got those, right? And I'm not going to show both. Someone asked, would I be able to access the PowerShell commercial running? Yes. Yes, you will be able to get the PowerShell, and that's in my Git repo. So, okay, so someone said, maybe I should show that. So I'm not sure if that was the question that someone wants to. So that's my Git repo. If you go to GitHub, just SQL Worldwide, or if you scan that, if you go to presentation, so wait till tomorrow morning, India time. This is where all the stuff. I'm going to refresh this repo today for sure. Hopefully, Omkar asked that question. So now, if I take this URL, right, notice that this is my read-only listener, and see this is a secondary server, right? So if we go to the portal, new query, connection, if we connect to this, and if we do a server name, see that it's secondary. So your app doesn't need to make any changes as long as you do this, right? So it will take you to the right place. So now the database is added, right? So if we go here, we can see that we have one database, right? And you can initiate a failover. I'm not going to do that for the sake of time. And if you want to get the details of a failover group, you can run this command. And one last thing I want to show you, I talked about read scale out, right? That you automatically get, if you're in a business critical tier, you automatically get multiple nodes, and you can use one of those for read only, right? How do you do that? I'm going to use SSMS because I had a hard time to demo this in the using Azure Data Studio because I think it caches the connection and I have a hard time. So if you can see this, I'm just doing a normal select, and I'm connecting to this server. I named it, read scale out, and it has a database. If we go to the portal, that database I created is in a business critical, right? Now, if I run this, it says I'm a read write. But if I'm doing the same query here, it says that, sorry, I need to change this because master is always in a read write. It says that I'm read only. So what happened here? I haven't done anything else other than, sorry, I went to the wrong one. No, that's not possible. Okay, so I don't know what happened. It's probably cached. So, you put your application read intent right here and you should see that. So I'm going to stop here.